Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to talk about Elon Musk taking over Twitter, how we see it from a UX point of view, and what this could mean for social going forward. Good morning, Dee. How are you doing today?
I am doing all right. I'm kind of drowning in all this Twitter news because there's so much going on. We originally had talked about like, oh, let's talk about kind of the Meta and Facebook stuff, but then
Yeah.
we started getting all of the Twitter stuff laid out. I was like, oh, this would go on forever. We just got to focus on Elon and Twitter this time around.
Yeah. So last week was Halloween. I'm curious, did you do anything? Like, how did it go? Because we had some craziness over here.
Well, I went to a Halloween party, which was a lot of fun. It was with some friends of ours that were entrepreneurs in the valley, like everybody else. And that was fun. It was my first like real Halloween costume in a while. Like for a while, I was just doing kind of that grab a mask and put it on, keep it simple. But like did the full face paint, full costume. Like I showed you the picture. I was really pretty happy with how it came out.
Yeah, it turned out amazing. I mean, I took that picture that you had sent over, and it looked like you maybe did someone take that for you? Did you take it in the mirror?
I just took it with the front facing camera on my phone.
Oh, okay. Just at the angle, it almost looked like it was a reflection or something. But it was so good, your face painting, that I
Mm-hmm.
took it, I printed it out, and I showed my wife and some friends, and they were like, "There's no way I would have ever guessed that was D ever." Like it was crazy good. And I'm wondering, did you use like YouTube tutorials to do that, or?
Well, I found a reference photo online that I thought looked really good, and then I did watch a couple of YouTube tutorials. I didn't really use them as far as like follow the tutorials, but it like gave me some good information about like which face paints to use and kind of a little bit about some techniques because I've never done that level of face paint before. Like I've done like little things here and there, but like not like a full face paint down onto my shoulders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like what brushes to use and like which face paints to get and like what techniques to use and how to like draw out your like a schematic of the design kind of before you start painting and things like that. So I used that, and then thankfully my significant other, she's big into painting, so she had a bunch of brushes and stuff, and she was like, "Go ahead and use these." So that was that was it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it turned out great. We ended up doing a full Harry Potter theme because my
Oh,
son's like
I
really
didn't know
big
you did
into.
Harry Potter. I didn't know you did Harry Potter.
Yeah, I've been meaning to send you over the pictures, but I just forgot to. But I'll send you over the pictures. So yeah, so we did Harry Potter, and most importantly was we decorated kind of the outside. So I put out a huge screen in front of the house, and I played Harry Potter on there. Then we had all these like creepy colors all over to kind of make it feel like Hogwarts. And then
Uh-huh.
we carved the pumpkins. And what I did was, and I was going to tell you this, is that I took one of the pumpkins and I actually found a schematic for Hogwarts, and then I
Hmm.
taped it on the pumpkin. I used a push pin and I push pinned the entire thing, and then I used wax cutting tools that I used to make those Mandalorian helmets, and
Oh,
I
nice.
actually carved it out. It took 4 hours. And I carved out every little thing, and then when it glows from the outside, you could see the entire Hogwarts. And it was like the hit. It was like we put it on a table like right in front of the street because
That's
everybody kind
awesome.
of has a party on our street. And people come by like, oh my gosh. And it kind of shows you. I mean, when you're willing to dedicate that time, it was a Sunday afternoon,
Yeah.
to doing stuff like that, you could do some crazy stuff on pumpkins. And so we did that, but it was a crazy party. I mean, I'm going to guess we probably had 500 kids come to our house,
Wow.
like lines of kids down the street. I mean, where I grew up, in Fremont, we got to a point where there was like no kids anymore after a while. And then where
Hmm.
I'm living now, in San Mateo, it's like there's just tons of kids everywhere. I mean, our neighbor, it's her birthday, and so they every year put out a huge tent. They put a bonfire in the front of the house. They
Oh,
make
wow.
Jello shots and all these things, and it's just like this huge party on the street. There was a guy in a rickshaw that would drive by and pick people up and rickshaw them back to their houses.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think I told you this. We had zero, zero kids show up.
It's so
So I
weird.
wonder. Yeah, my friend, my buddy down in LA, or Anaheim, he's the one who works for Disney. He said he had a bunch of kids too. So I wonder if I also noticed like the Halloween candy section of the store is shrunk down to almost nothing. But I wonder if now it's kind of becoming like a destination thing where like kids are going to like the top neighborhoods where everybody
Hmm.
decorates and gets really into it. Like you like sounds like your neighborhood where they have
Yeah.
bonfires and rickshaws and all kinds of stuff. And people are coming in from outside of from other neighborhoods to that one area rather than just going in their local neighborhood.
I think so
Like you
because we had a bunch of cars coming in like crazy, like around
Mhm.
7:30 at night, and I was just like, where are these people going? It can't be people coming home from work. And I think people were coming down, parking on the street, and then hitting all the houses on our street. And we live in a very like small little community, but like the street we live on is the widest street. So most of the streets in San Mateo are very narrow, right? Because the older
Mhm.
houses very small. And then the streets are really small, but ours has a little bit of a wider street. So I think that kind of plays into it as well. It's like easy to walk with the kids and stuff. I mean, we had people with like those full blown costumes like you would see at Disneyland walking around, like shaking
Yeah,
hands and stuff. And they were
with
the
the
ones
kind of
that were,
costumes and stuff.
what is that?
Like the cosplay Comic Con costumes, things like that.
Yeah, where it's like you walk up to the character and you put your arm around them and take pictures and stuff like that. But they were of
Mhm.
Paw Patrol. It was crazy.
I
I mean, super fun.
not that familiar with. I have to ask you before we get into this. What was your costume? Were you Hagrid? Please tell me you were Hagrid.
No, no. So I
Ah,
was Professor
okay.
So I'm very new to it. I just started Harry Potter, but my son's on the fourth. Well, he's my son, but on the
How do
fourth
you
book.
not know Harry Potter?
Oh, well, this is right. And I was talking to some neighbors, and they're like, "You haven't read Harry Potter?" And I was like, "I don't know." It was like a weird timing. It was like I was out of school already, and it was like I just never picked up the books. And my wife, she read every one of them. And as I'm starting to read it now, I'm like, "Man, this is really good."
Well, you might not be aware of this, but there were a series of movies that came out.
I did. So I played the
Harry
movies out there, and I
Potter.
was kind of standing there watching them while I was outside, and I was like, "Man, these are really good movies. I need to watch these." I know nothing about Harry Potter. And then my son went as Harry Potter. Um, and then my wife went as that, what is her name? That
Could have been Professor McGonagall or
McGonagall. That was it.
okay.
Yeah. So it was super good. I'll send you the pictures. I looked
I feel like
horrendously.
I'm talking to someone from another planet who doesn't know anything about Harry
I
Potter.
know. Although I did think that next year would be really fun if the whole family went as Goonies.
That would be good. I was actually kind of expecting you to do the Mandalorian thing.
Well, the thing is that one person in this family doesn't like Star Wars very much.
Oh,
It's
oh,
the
really?
shortest and littlest one, and so,
Really?
yeah, so it's kind of a bummer in that sense, but, yeah, I have, like, so much Mandalorian stuff, I was like, "Oh, it'd be so cool to do that," but he's not that into it, so I didn't wanna force it, um, but he definitely said, like, "Oh, maybe we go as the Goonies next year," and I was like, "That'd be kinda cool," and I don't know if the younger kids would know what that is when they saw it, but definitely older people would recognize us.
Yes, the older people now. All
I
right.
know.
Well, let's get into it.
All right, let's
Um,
get into it. Why don't you kick this thing off, man? Because a lot has happened since last week.
all right. So I'm gonna why don't we switch off on some sections because
Yeah.
there's a lot that happened. So
Oh, wait. I want to point
the
out one thing first. I want to point out that on the record, I believe I did say in one of the podcasts that I did not think this transaction would go through. Is that correct?
well, early on, I mean, I think it was in March we said that we didn't think it was going to go through, and it basically didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it was
And
like,
then
yeah.
when he kind of gave up and said like, "All right, fine, I'll pay you. Just don't make me do a deposition because things will come out."
Yeah.
That's when I think both of us were like, "All right, well, this is actually happening now."
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a forced transaction, in my opinion. But, anyways, all right, go ahead. Move.
All right. So, the big news, obviously, Elon takes possession of Twitter. So here's some of the things that have happened since, and I'll run through the first kind of topic, and then we'll talk about that a little bit, and we'll get into the next one. So the first thing that happened was Elon named himself the CEO and dissolved the board. So that meant that he is now CEO of his fifth company, I believe it is.
Yep.
And then he brought in some of his engineering team from Tesla, people who I believe mostly were working on autopilot program.
Yep.
So that means that there were fewer people working on autopilot, and those people, that staff who's mostly familiar with AI and autopilot systems, transportation systems, are now working on social media algorithms. So I don't know how well that's going to work out. On top of that, He fired multiple executives, including the CEO and CFO, and
Mm-hmm.
he claimed that it was for cause.
Mm-hmm.
And the reports are out saying that's to avoid paying them their severance. Musk has denied that it's just to avoid severance, but it seems like he might not have enough information to establish cause within less than 24 hours of taking control of the company. So
Well, that's something. So I believe that what he said regarding cause was the fact that he didn't think that they were honest with him during the entire process of purchasing Twitter. That he was giving him all the information that he needed. He felt like they were dishonest. The thing about cause is it's got to go to court. So this is one of
yeah,
those
it's going
things
to go
that
to
could go
court.
on for 2 years.
I mean, two of the people that he fired were lawyers.
Yeah,
He's the
he doesn't
general
care. I can
counsel.
tell you that right
He's
now.
definitely going to court. He's going to, well, if he's claiming that they're not being honest, then he's basically back in the situation where he was before, where he's going to have to give a deposition about proving that they were being dishonest. So he's back in that kind of trial thing that he was trying to avoid. So good luck with that,
I'll tell
because
you
that's the whole
when he
reason he
purchased
decided to.
Twitter, you're basically buying all the stock off of everybody, right? So everybody gets a cash payment
Yeah,
for their stock, right?
yeah,
I think between the three of them, they walked away with $150 million. So,
yeah. They
we'll
could
see if they even
afford
care.
the
Yeah,
lawsuit, but I think the whole strategy, because we've seen it happen now, seen it work, is just force a deposition. It's like, all
yeah.
right, well, we don't have to. You can push out the trial as long as you want, but we're going to do a deposition, and if you and you're going to have to be upfront about what data you have and what data you don't. And I don't believe, because this is all essentially, I don't know if for a civil trial if it would be public record, but he was definitely avoiding it before, so that seems to be an effective strategy, and I think they're going to do it again. On top of that, so CEO, CFO, some of the different company lawyers are out. Several key staff have resigned, including the chief customer officer, so the person in charge of going out and getting advertisers, the head of staffing, the head of product, and there's also reports that Elon has denied, although the reporting seems pretty thorough and well sourced, that there's a planned layoff of 25% of the remaining employees.
Hmm.
So all of this brings up. So there's an exodus of talent, which is expected when you are making a huge change in how the company's run in a controversial way. People that not everybody's going to be behind. And as a part of the acquisition, a lot of people, especially at higher echelons of the company and people in leadership with a lot of institutional knowledge who've been with the company for a long time, they just got paid out $54 a share for all the stock that they've been acquiring over the years.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people with who are now probably a lot of new millionaires who don't necessarily need to work for Twitter anymore and might not want to work for Twitter anymore. So the big question I'm going to ask you is: do you think Twitter is headed for a talent and staffing problem?
So here's what word on the street is. Word on the street is that Apple and a couple of these other companies, Meta and stuff like that, have already been picking them up. So
Yeah.
have already been coming and saying, "Oh my gosh, like you're head of this. I'll take them," um, or I'll take her, or I'll grab the whole group, or whatever it is. So there's already conversations happening like that. I believe what he is doing is from the startup playbook, which is, one of the things they always say, if you go to get your engineering degree, when they talk to you about, engineering in general, is that like fewer people on a problem usually has greater success than more people on a problem. I mean, you know that as well.
Hmm.
I think what he's going to do is trim it down to a very, very lean skeleton staff. And then he's
Yeah.
going to focus on the things that he believes are most important, and everybody else is going to go. If I had to take a guess, I think there's some people that would stay because they want to see what's going to happen. And then I think there's people who are just going to bail, probably a pretty large percentage, because it just doesn't feel welcoming anymore. And that is something that happens on huge transitions. I mean, you think about it, that happens on normal transitions, like a just a company buying another company, and they're like, let's do this together. They lose people from that. Imagine how many they're going to lose in
Yeah.
this situation. And he wants them to leave. So the reality is this: when you lay people off, you have to provide them with severance and this and that. If people quit, you don't have to do anything. So some of this stuff is probably a way of kind of seeing who's going to just walk away early before he actually has to formally lay people off.
Well, I think one of the things we're going to see, and you're absolutely right. that other companies are picking them up. I can guarantee it because there is a labor shortage in Silicon Valley. There's not enough engineers. There's not enough designers. So what is going to happen is they have their stock. They're going to get a bunch of people are going to get poached. A lot of the people like these higher level people, they can walk into just being on company boards for startups, and that
Hmm.
could be their job for a while.
Yeah.
Uh, but they're going to wait to see who gets laid off, and people who get laid off will take their severance, and whoever doesn't get laid off, that's when you'll start seeing a huge wave of resignations and people going to other companies.
Yeah, I think it's a really unique time though, because from the people that I have talked to and kind of surveyed regarding the situation, it does feel like a little bit shaky in the valley. There's a lot of layoffs happening in a lot of different places, so I think
Mhm.
people are also partly like, should I stay and wait this like whole potential recession or weird 2023 thing out, or should I try to grab something new now? And so I think people are kind of in that situation. It's not like it was 2 years ago where you could have just probably went boop, and just grabbed any job anywhere.
I don't know. I mean, well, keep in mind, imagine you just made $2 million off of RSUs.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I might just take a little time to reflect.
yeah, you might. I imagine there's some people who are waiting to see what happens, and they're probably have it in mind that they're going to. They don't necessarily need the money too much. There are people they might go work at Mastodon or some other social network that's going to be popping up. The jobs are out there, and I think that a lot of people are looking at, especially when it comes to tech, any kind of recession or downturn is kind of temporary, and they're always temporary, and tech tends to recover more quickly than other industries. So I don't know. I think it's coming. What I think is ultimately the big problem is not so much not finding people; it's finding the right people.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if so. I mean, Elon's bringing in a bunch of engineers, but I don't. My take on things is that Twitter's problem is not an engineering problem. It's ultimately a design and policy problem.
Correct. And
So,
and he has stated that. Like he has said like I want to change the way that things function and everything. And like,
mhm,
he's a good track record with previous companies of coming in and saying I'm going to do it this way and everyone's like I don't know and all this stuff and then kind of forcing it through and kind of getting some good results. But this is a different ball game though because he
yeah,
can't control what people say. Like I mean, he can't control what happens within the ecosystem. Like you could control what happens with your Tesla. Matter of fact, they know where every Tesla is on the road in every given location, right? Like
mhm,
they can control the manufacturing. You can kind of control like that kind of stuff, but you can't control if your platform goes out of control, right? It's very
yeah,
challenging. You have to lock everybody down. Like you said, like he wants to do lots of things in that space that we'll talk about in a second here.
yeah. I think he's going to lose a lot of institutional knowledge. He's going to have a hard time replacing it because I think there's going to be a lot of competition for people in a short period of time. I imagine that they've a lot of companies have already done their layoffs, and they're going to start looking to replace people in the next year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be a lot of competition. And in that time frame, especially after we talk about some of the other things that are going on, I think it's going to be a challenge. I think that I don't know. I think he's going to have to figure out a strategy in order to attract people to the company because from everything I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like a very attractive place to work, especially when you can't receive stock as compensation. So he's going to have to pay
Absolutely.
people
Yeah, he's
in
doing
cash
bonuses. Yeah.
200 plus for regular engineers, 200K, 300K for regular engineers because you can't compensate them with stock.
Somebody asked me a question the other day. They said, "Do you believe that he could pull this off?" And I'm like, "Well, there's two parts to that statement. Number one is, or two parts to that answer. Number one is that if he can get the people to actually do the job on the platform, he can get the good engineers, the designers, people who are motivated to be part of this whole thing. I wouldn't bet against Elon. Like it has proven many people wrong that he is pretty good operator in that sense. But on the flip side to that, this is unlike anything else we've ever seen before. Even people with the best intentions have walked into these things and said, like, "Oh my god, like social is brutal." Right. And I know that he
Yeah.
doesn't care if things are hard. Like, matter of fact, I think he's going to shrink this company super small. He's going to get it under control and then he's going to try to grow it. That's where I think it's going to be really hard is going
I
from
agree
like,
with you that it
yeah,
is going to shrink super small,
yeah.
but maybe not in the way that he intends. So Before we get into some of those other things, as we said before, I don't think that Twitter is an engineering problem. I think it is a policy and design issue. So let's talk about some of the other things that are going on. Do you want me to continue to kind of run through things, or do you want to take the
Oh
sides?
no, I could talk about this. So there has been a spike in hate speech and racial slurs. Um, you know, I kind of, dude, did you not know this was going to happen? Like literally,
Of
the
course, it's going to
moment
happen.
he took it over, I was like, here we go. And so everybody gets on the platform because he has been saying, it's going to be open and free for all and this kind of stuff, which it can't be if you actually want to have regulation, right? And control it. And the second that he took over, massive amounts of racial slurs and hate speech happening. They did say a lot of them came from bots, but that's just kind of how it works, right? There's like people are programming bots to do horrible things. Of course, he jumps in by amplifying it with his conspiracy theory about the attack of Paul Pelosi, right? He's done a couple of really weird and gross kind of like tweets like in the past, like one about Bill Gates and stuff like that. And I just don't know what he's thinking in the moment, but it's not helping at all. It's amplifying a group of people who probably represent the minority of our country, but are starting to become a larger population on Twitter.
Yes. Well, it feels to me as though Elon just doesn't really have the impulse control. Like
Yes.
he's approaching Twitter, his experience on Twitter is like, oh, it's this fun thing that I get to do in my downtime that I don't have to be too responsible for. About I can just post whatever I feel like, and I feel like that is something that you can do when you are not the CEO of a company.
Yeah.
And when you are a CEO of a company of that company, like you look at what Jack Dorsey used to tweet, or what Zuckerberg posts on Facebook, or Tom used to post on MySpace. Those were things about setting the tone for what the company is.
Uh-huh.
And if he wants to keep treating it as like his playground, then you pay for your entertainment and your fun stuff. You don't get paid for it.
Yeah,
So,
I've actually heard him on interviews say. I've watched a lot of interviews with him, and
mhm,
heard him say stuff like he believes Twitter's the Wild West. If you can't handle it, you should like not be on there. Like this should be the open, free for all of the internet. Like just those feelings of just like why does everything have to be like moderated? But he's going to learn honestly, like really quickly, that if you don't moderate it, then you lose a lot of people because people don't want to wake up and just be harassed all day. like
yeah,
who wants that, right? They don't. If they're looking for information, then there should be something called Twitter news or something, and you can only get news on it, and you don't ever have to see anyone's personal opinions, especially if they're going to be horrific things that they're saying about the newscaster. Or it's like, you'll see something posted from a news source, and then the next thing down there
mhm,
is like some horrible thing about the person who literally is reading the news. And you're like,
yeah.
why do I need this?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this one. I saw this morning, but apparently Twitter employees have reported they're losing access to content moderation tools to handle situations where users are violating the terms of service.
I
And
didn't
it
hear that.
sounds as
No.
though, yeah, it sounds as though it's trying to be limited to actual harm and not like harassment and some other things that could be going on, or misinformation. And a lot of, I mean, some people are tying this to the midterms coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that per se. It does seem to kind of to fall in line with Elon's kind of stated goal of making it kind of this free speech thing that I don't know if he really believes in, because it doesn't show up in other aspects of his behavior.
Well, I'll tell
But
you something. I want to say something about that. So I was listening to Kara Swisher talk about Elon, and she said, "I've known Elon." She said since the very beginning. She's like, and we've had
Mhm.
thoughtful conversations. She's like, he is very, very intelligent, and he knows what he's doing. And she said, I also don't believe that he cares about one side or the other. So every side thinks that they care. He starts to do things that like benefit one side, of like the Democrats or whatever it is. And suddenly they're like, oh, Elon, right? And then he'll switch over and do something for the other side. Like she's like, he doesn't care about either side. He cares
well,
about
that
getting his things out into the world and functioning and succeeding, right? More than he cares about pleasing one side or the other, right? And so if that's his mental framework, then things that he do, the things that he do, things that he does are going to tie back to his success, not tied back to pleasing a group.
So it's interesting you mentioned that because I saw Kara Swisher. Let me see if I can find it. Said something just yesterday about how much the Elon that she used to know is not the Elon we're seeing today.
Yeah, yeah, she said that. She said, we used to have great conversations. We didn't agree on everything. She said, but just, thoughtful, like engineering driven conversations. And the sad part about it is, D, is prior to like these things, I really liked Elon. Like I was like, this guy knows how to operate. He'll like say, we need electric cars and then spend, 20 years of his life making sure that happens. Or we need to get these rockets cheaper. Why are we buying them from Russia or borrowing rockets from Russia? Like really good stuff. And if he didn't go down this path of like fighting with people online and saying inappropriate things and that kind of stuff, I feel like he would be like America's engineer. Like everyone would look to him and say like, that's what you should strive to be when it comes to being an engineer or an operator. But, he's kind of venturing down this weird path. That's kind of disappointing.
Yeah. So I found the comment from Kara Swisher, and she said this November 1st, which was yesterday, as far as when we're recording this.
Yeah.
She said, "This is not the dude I knew who was pretty cool. This guy is, as he called me recently, an asshole." So I think that to some extent, the things that she has said previously doesn't necessarily apply. And for me, the issue is this is a person who hasn't proved himself to be very adept at social interaction himself. He's
Yeah.
now in charge of a social company when he's trying to run, I believe, four other companies, one of which has lost over 50% of its value this year and is going to be facing some very stiff competition from much larger companies with greater production capacity.
Yeah.
So
But that's normal for that business. Like that's one thing is like, car businesses are
I don't think it's
horrifically
normal
painful.
for. I don't think Lee Iacocca had four other companies that he was running. Most of them in completely different categories.
No, 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 no. What I'm saying is that like you're mentioning Tesla, but if we'll talk about Tesla
Mhm.
in another episode, but like the reality is that car companies in general are like airlines, right? They're just horrifically terrible to run and hard and ups and
Yeah,
downs and all arounds. And like it's a very hard business, right? So that put aside, like if he put 100% of his efforts in that business, he would still have trouble, right? You know what I mean? Like that's just
yeah.
normal, right? But you're right. Like running all these
That's
companies.
one of the reasons why, if he put 100% of his efforts into one of these companies, it would be very challenging. Now he's can only put in 20%.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. I mean, however he carves it out. I mean, here's the deal.
Yeah.
I believe within the next, what month is this? November, December. I think by the end of January, there'll be a CEO of Twitter. There will be somebody or president or something that is running day-to-day operations of Twitter. Like he will find
Well,
somebody to do that.
it was definitely a. Like I thought to myself, if the right way for him to do this is to if he already has a CEO in mind and can get that person in day one.
Yeah.
And when he didn't do that, I thought to myself, okay, this is where things begin to go off the rails. So, in light of all this, so we're talking about kind of content on
Yeah.
Twitter. The experience is right, what it could be. So the question is Twitter on its way to becoming the free for all hellscape that so many people have predicted? What do you think?
In the short term, for sure. Like I think in the short term, it's going to be a huge mess. And when I say short term, I say the next 2 years. There's going to be competition coming out guaranteed in the next 2 years. New competition, like stuff we haven't heard of. That's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
because this is an opportunity just presented itself. And I believe that he could clean up the structure for how Twitter functions, but I honestly could not tell you how people are going to respond to having a completely different Twitter. Like I just don't know. I'm not that interested in it, to be honest with you. Like I look at it and I'm like, if this was just a news source, that'd be super cool, right? It'd be like dropping really fast news information that I might need about something, information that helps me like expand my knowledge base, not like fight with people. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if that doesn't go away, there's no point of me staying on Twitter. And we've talked about potentially transitioning off where we drop our links to our resources to something else, right? We've talked about this, right? Because it's just not working on Twitter. It just doesn't give us what we want from it. So it's such a hard one to say. Like I said, I feel like he could fix, like you said, he could fix the engineering stuff, but can you fix
Yeah.
human behavior? And as you and I know, coming from psychology, like that's a really tough challenge. And actually, human behavior is never like removed; it's replaced. And so, what is it going to get replaced with?
Yeah, I don't think this isn't, like I said before, this is not an engineering problem. And if he tackles it like an engineering problem, it's not going to work. I will say a little bit. This is a bit of a trick question, though, and it's a trick question because it's already basically a free for all hellscape, and it kind of has been for a while.
Yeah.
This is maybe just a more helly hellscape. So we'll see what happens. I think it. I think it kind of will. I think he's ultimately going to let a lot of the bad actors back on the platform. I think Kanye is going to get back on there and say like, I'm vindicated, and he's going to say a bunch of terrible things about Jews and people are going to argue about it. I mean, I've seen several people that I follow on Twitter just reposting death threats that they've gotten over the last
Mm.
couple of days. So I think the future is now.
Yeah. I mean, do you know anyone who has a really wonderful experience on Twitter?
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I haven't either. I mean, I've had people.
I've
I've
heard
had
people say
people.
that they do have some fun, and
Yeah.
people say that sometimes or a lot of the times the positives make it worth it. But I think they're kind of working in an environment in which there isn't very much competition. And if somebody steps in, say for example, somebody who scoops up a bunch of employees who just left a social networking company who
Hmm.
have a lot of institutional knowledge, who are now free to do what they believe is right because their leadership is changing, then I think it could be very difficult for Twitter to continue to not become Parler. There is a very real chance that, like Parler and some of these other platforms that have not been sufficiently moderated, that you can see Twitter yanked from the Play Store and from the App Store. Like you cannot basically use Twitter as an app on Apple devices or Android devices.
Yeah, I mean that happens. I mean, if it gets
Mhm.
gets really nasty, it could, and the one thing that I don't think we've considered also too is that Elon does have the ability that most people don't have to pick up the phone and ask major influencers to just stay, right? Like we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I mean, somebody who has 100 million followers or whatever it is, and just say, "Can you please stay on the platform for a while? I really need you on there for this period of time." I mean, there's a lot of backroom conversations that happen in these companies and stuff that we're not necessarily privy to.
Yeah. Although if Apple, for example, starts their own platform and you have, uh, Tim Apple reaching out to people in the same way, who knows where they're going to go?
Well, first of all, that's true, but I don't think Apple would because I think it's off brand for them. But I do see. Well, I mean, word on the street is Jack Dorsey's starting a new social company, so we'll see what happens there. You know what I mean?
Well, what if it, I mean, I could absolutely see Bezos doing something like this, especially considering his rivalry.
Uh huh.
They're
Uh huh.
starting things up. He's got a lot of the internal architecture already ready. I kind of think that they have, well, just about anybody has the capacity to provide a better experience than Twitter.
Yeah.
Uh, Elon has the capacity to provide a better
Of
experience
course.
than what currently exists on Twitter.
Of course.
I just don't know that it's going to happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a very weird one, and I'm kind of tired of social, honestly. Like it's hasn't yielded a lot of results in the sense of like personal satisfaction or happiness. It's more like it helps you reach people for sure, and like get
yeah,
the word out about the things that you're doing. But it's like it helps you get the word out, but then you have to suffer through a bunch of stuff to get there.
yeah. And for the most part, I'm not interested in random people's opinions. I wish I could just like see certain accounts and block everybody else.
Uh huh.
It's and there's for the most part, it's impossible to know the perspective or knowledge that anybody is bringing to the table. You kind of end up just taking them by their word.
Yeah.
But I think this brings us to our next bit of topic that's been going on. So, according to several reports, Twitter has been losing users, and this actually starts to predate um, Elon taking over or even announcing the acquisition.
Hmm.
So, one of those is several celebrities have reported leaving the platform, and several others are considering leaving. And so far, that list, I mean, honestly, doesn't look super impressive. At the same time, a lot of the biggest accounts like Taylor Swift and Barack Obama, they don't post very often.
Hmm.
But it could be something they have to deal with. And at the same time, you have heavy tweeters who are responsible for 90% of the content of the platform have been decreasing for some time and continues to do so. So these are the people who are kind of driving the content on the platform.
So what I heard was that a couple of the celebrities had said, "I'm going to take a pause from contributing," meaning like the account still
Mhm.
exists, but I'm not going to post anything, and I'm going to wait and see what happens. And I think you're going to get a lot of that. I think you're going to get a lot of people kind of saying like, "I'm going to cool off for a little bit. I'm going to observe from a distance." I think
Mhm.
actually leaving the platform, I think people will wait and just see what happens first.
Yeah.
I don't think they're just going to jump right up.
Well, behaviorally, if they stop going to Twitter and if they stop opening the app, if they are not tweeting, then it will take something to stimulate them getting back into it. So I think that's gonna have to be part of their strategy of saying like uh if The Rock, for example, stops using, and I didn't hear anything from The Rock about using this. I'm just using him as a random example.
Yeah.
If, for example, The Rock decides that he's going to take a break and not tweet just because he wants to see what happens, and he's doing great on Instagram and TikTok and other platforms, then you would have to do something to get his attention to get back on. And maybe Elon can reach out to him directly. I don't know what their relationship is. There are plenty of people out there who he's a very controversial figure. So there are plenty of people out there who would be like, no thanks.
Yeah.
But it's just another thing that they're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And also this big topic of should you charge for the blue check mark?
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, Elon announced through a tweet, which this whole exchange, well, we'll talk about it, but he announced a $20 a month charge for verified accounts. And then, after some pushback, he almost immediately walked it back to $8 a month. So this is obviously doesn't strike me as a super well formulated plan. It's just kind of something he's been thinking about.
Hmm.
It prompted more celebrities, a lot of times the main draw for the platform, to comment they would not pay and possibly leave the platform. That includes people like Stephen King and Neil Gaiman and Casey Neistat, people with millions and millions of followers. And then we're also hearing that as a part of this, and this kind of speaks back to the staffing issues that we mentioned earlier. Twitter employees were given 1 week to redesign the subscription and verification systems and were instructed to work 12 hours a day for 7 days a week and that their jobs were on the line. So, considering the possible exodus of employees, if they're asked to work 12 hours a day for 7 days a week after becoming recent millionaires, I don't know that that is necessarily going to work out. And honestly, this is not the way to create a complex to tackle a complex system like this.
Well, I think that's
Uh,
how he tackles problems at other companies. Like, we've heard about like Tesla employees work 7 days a week, 6, 7 days a week, and still do. You know what I mean? They come in and they get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they usually stay past dinner and cruise home at 8 o'clock at
sure.
night, right? So like his expectation is probably to put everyone in line with how SpaceX and Tesla employees work. And that, like I said, could be another approach to basically saying if you don't want to be here, leave, because it's easier that if you quit than for me to lay you off.
Yeah. I what's your take on that? You think that that's going to be effective on a company like Twitter?
So I think it's very effective if you have a young, super motivated engineer and she or he just wants to just kill it and just engineer and build things, right? Engineers just love to build stuff, right? If they don't have anywhere to go and they're just like, hey, it's fun working and stuff, you'll get them and you might look at them and say, hey, they should stay and help build this next generation of Twitter. The other people are going to be like, no, thanks. Like, I've been here for a long time, got my payout, even if it's a small payout, I'll go find something else, go work somewhere else. And I think this is the shake, like this is the sifter, right? He's going to
Mm-hmm.
sift for the next 2 months and a lot's going to happen. A lot of people are going to leave, and then you can have a few left over, and then he's going to start rehiring. And a matter of fact, he may ask some of the people who are working on projects at other companies that he has and say, hey, if you're tired of working on software for the cars or whatever it is, I'd love to get your help over at Twitter, and we'll find other,
Mm-hmm.
MIT engineers to go work on the software for the cars or whatever.
Yeah.
and just play this game for a while until he can kind of get everything staffed up. Because one of the things that he's actually been very, very, very good at, and a lot of people have talked about this, is that he goes around to a lot of the universities, like Harvard and MIT and Stanford, all these places, and he sits down and talks to these groups of engineers, and he
Hmm.
basically is a very big recruiter. That's what he does. He recruits people.
Sure.
And so he's been pretty good at it in the past. So I don't know if he's going to be successful at it with this, but if you look at his track record, he's pretty good at dragging some
Yeah.
talented people in.
So I agree with you that I think this works pretty well for engineers.
Yeah.
And I think it would probably, and even the work approach of 12 hours a day, 7 days a week is actually not too bad for an engineer. I think most engineers do pretty well within that because they tackle a problem, they engineer it, and they get it solved. I don't think, and we said this before, don't think that the solution to the problem is an engineering one.
Yeah.
I think it's the person who will potentially figure out social is going to be some high level user experience architect who's going to figure out here's the model for creating the good experience on a social platform.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they would respond to this approach of 12 hours a day, 7 days a week?
I don't think that they would respond the same way. I think they'd be more, here's the thing. UX people like us, we
Mm-hmm.
realize that there is a huge benefit to doing something, pausing, marinating, testing, and then
Mm-hmm.
re-engaging. Because
Yes.
we realize that we have to test the temperature on certain things before we can move forward aggressively. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a lot of like go, pause, go, pause. Where with engineers, once they have a directive, right, you just go. Um,
Yes.
so I don't think this would work very well for them, but I think he's going to probably be the lead UX architect, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think that's very encouraging because I think that his approach is very engineering focused, and I don't think that's the way to solve this problem. Ultimately, I think that that work approach, and we've seen this, we've seen data around this, that the too much continuous work for creatives, especially including UX designers, is a bad way to work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you need to do as somebody who's working in UX is get out in the world and connect with normal life and connect with other human beings and understand their perspective. And if you're locked in a room, locking yourself in a room, staring at a laptop for almost every waking hour, then you start to lose touch with what real, like other normal human beings need and want in their life.
Yeah, and that's a perfect reason to not do the heavy engineering approach, but it's also one of the shining examples is Airbnb, right?
Yes.
If you actually look at how everything's designed, the curation, the experience, and all this stuff, because it's a very UX driven company.
Hmm.
And if you could kind of bring that to Twitter, at least 30% of that, maybe you have an opportunity to create a better platform. You know, the thing is that there's a lot of places to get information now. And Twitter's not the only one. And so his competition is basically going to be everyone else in the world now. And it was before, but now that he's kind of
Hmm.
like blowing it up and then kind of restarting here, it's almost like building a new startup from scratch. Right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he's got to just start competing with everybody from the ground up. I mean, yeah, he has the name, has an existing
Hmm.
user base, some existing user base, but to start over like that, um, it's going to require a whole new level of thinking. I mean, I don't like betting against him because I think he does a good job at a lot of things, but at the same time, like this is just kind of like a nasty, nasty problem to deal with. I mean, look at what
Well, I
Facebook
think
did,
it's
creating
very,
a
yeah.
council to look at things and decide what's right and wrong and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't know that that's the right way to do things either.
Well, I think it's very much outside of his strengths. I think his strengths are very much when it comes down to engineering. And over and over again, this is not an engineering problem. Like the engineering on Twitter is actually pretty solid. It's really about an approach in order to make people have a good experience. Like that's what this whole podcast is about. It's all about the experience. And people have said very good things about the Tesla cars, for example, that
Mm-hmm.
it's a good experience. But this is different. This is not like you have complete control over a product. He's actively saying that he's not going to take complete control of the product and he's going to rely on other human beings
Mm-hmm.
in order to provide a good experience to other human beings. And there's that famous quote by Jean-Paul Sartre: "Hell is other people."
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, that's kind of what you're going to end up with. But aside from kind of just the working kind of experience at Twitter and this, this kind of engineering focused approach, what do you think of this $20 a month fee for verified accounts? That's
I actually do think there needs to be a fee for it. And the reason why I say that is because every platform that seems to be kind of stable and successful, there is a charge to be part of it. And it- we learned this a long
I
time
don't.
ago. Like if you give
Yeah.
someone something for free, they feel like they could act however they want, do whatever they want. Once people start having to pay for something, even if it's like $1, there's like this
Hmm.
internal commitment that people have to like being on it, using it, contributing on it, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
$20 seems like a lot because I mean, if you really think about it, from the perspective, let's say the average Twitter user that's verified, maybe that doesn't have like millions of dollars. $20 is more than what you pay for a Netflix account, right? So if you
Yeah.
said like, hey, it costs $5 a month, $8 a month, totally think it's reasonable. It'll certify you, verify you,
Hmm.
revenue will come in, that kind of stuff. But I would basically make it a flat fee that everyone's comfortable with. I wouldn't test it in the market the way that he's been testing it, but I would have
No.
tested it by actually talking to users first privately. Um,
Yeah.
and then I do think there needs to be a fee, but I just don't think it needs to be like super crazy expensive.
I will actually disagree with you on
Yeah.
that. I think if you look at some very successful platforms, YouTube, for example, they do not charge their content creators in order to create videos. I think that's the analogy here. If you're
Yeah.
looking at like one of the people who's gotten the most attention is Stephen King, saying like, "I'm not paying that; they should be paying me," and he's right. He is creating content for the platform, and now they want to charge him for it. So I think that's one of the things. Anytime you start charging for something, especially for people who are for anything, I mean, this just happens with tax policy or anything like that. You're ultimately discouraging it. So by charging for it, you're going to see fewer people verified just by nature, even if people think it's a good idea. So,
I
and it's
agree
true.
with that to some extent though,
You're
D, because you're basically saying that they're paying to be a creator. They could still create without being verified.
yeah. So for a lot of people, if people are not influencers,
Uh-huh.
if they're not corporate entities, if they don't want their job to be I create tweets for a living,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't make sense for them to create this to pay this.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose a lot of people who say that. So Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, Casey Neistat, these are all people who are like, no, I'm not doing that. And these are all people who are making their careers that are not dependent on Twitter. So,
Mm.
and the danger there is now, Casey Neistat is going to be like, I'm not going to be verified. And then people are going to come in and impersonate me and post things like Neil Gaiman posted some examples of unverified accounts posting fake information that he then, got tagged in, and things like Sandman got canceled and it didn't. It was just, some account pretending to be a journalist and posting fake information.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of people are just, Stephen King. I don't think he cares very much if people are out there like impersonating him and posting stuff. I mean, he's been in this game for a long time, and I think a lot of people who are in that realm agree with him. I think it's going to decrease engagement for a lot of people who are creating compelling content on the platform.
Yeah.
However, I will say, and if you called it out, this is like a perfect example of what not to do when introducing a new policy is to just throw it out there. You want to kind of like talk it over with some users, get them on a call or in a room, and just show them like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What are your thoughts? What about this? What about
Hmm.
that? And then you can make the announcement and you can say like, hey, the devil's in the details. Here's what we're doing. And I'll tell you right now, I'll tell you a way in which this could work that I'm sure Elon has not considered. Don't charge for celebrities, charge for corporate accounts,
Uh-huh.
and charge for like official entities, charge for like the CDC or PG&E or any of these major companies who need to make verified informational accounts, including a lot of the journalist stuff like Wall Street Journal or New York Times or whatever else. Make them pay for their corporate accounts to be verified,
Hmm.
and for individuals, especially celebrities or whatnot, they just go through the process. And maybe for some of them, if it's a more difficult person to verify, maybe somebody who wants to be verified, but they're not like a major public figure. Maybe there's a one-time $10, $20 fee. You just pay it once, you go through the verification, and that's it. Otherwise, it makes no sense to go through the verification process and then continue paying money for not receiving a service. You're just All you're getting is a logo at that point. They're doing nothing to maintain your verification
Yeah.
unless you're paying for them to go out there. Here's something that could be a value. So, an enforcement system on impersonators. So if somebody comes out and says blah blah blah, then they're going to get preferential treatment in removing something if you're impersonating
They already
somebody
do
who
that
is.
now. They already do that now.
Yeah.
If you have a blue check mark, they actually try to, protect you from impersonators and stuff.
Yeah, but it hasn't been very effective. So if you can pay to get into an upper tier so that those people are more aggressively removed, then that's something that people might be willing to pay for.
Yeah.
But I think it makes a lot of sense if, like, if you're Caltrain, if you're American Airlines, if you're one of these corporate accounts who needs to make corporate announcements of policy changes or events that are going on, yeah, charge them. People do that
Yeah, but
for other
celebrities are just corporations
organizations.
anyways, though. Everything is under a corporation. And when, they don't put it under the individual name, they're not going to pay individual taxes on money that comes in. They're basically tweeting something and then it goes back to one of their companies buying, selling out of all their shoes or whatever it is. I mean, becomes a little bit of a slippery slope, right? Because you're like,
It depends
okay,
on if they're organized as a corporation and whether or not they're running it themselves or having a social media manager do it.
yeah, yeah,
But if you're a Neil Gaiman who's just there to try to interact with fans, and that's not your work. You don't want to be in the business of writing tweets for a living.
yeah.
Then you're just not going to do it, and the platform suffers for it.
Yeah. This is an interesting design exercise for us because,
Yeah.
we're both looking at this from different angles of just like, how do you kind of like control certain entities and kind of keep things under good organization and stuff like that. And I don't think the answer is actually going to emerge soon. I think it's going to happen over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. I think we're going to see what
I,
happens during
I,
the holidays. I mean, you gotta remember the holidays is a very, very busy time for a lot of companies, right? They're tweeting like
mhm.
special deals today and all that, different things that are going on to all their followers. It'd be really interesting to see like after the holidays, after all this stuff dies down a little bit, like in like February, March, April, like around that time,
Mhm.
if they just start looking at it and going, well, we don't really need this anymore. Or let's transition everybody over to a new platform. Or, hey, you know what? Actually, this is kind of working okay. Like, let's pay $8 a month for the next 3 months and just see if we get any benefit from it. Like, there's a lot of people will test things out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Quickly. You see that in subscription services, right? People will go on for like one show or something, try it out, and if it doesn't click, they're gone, right?
So I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Mm-hmm.
You've said multiple times, I don't really like betting against Elon. So I'm going to ask you, what are your predictions for what happens over the next couple of years with Twitter?
Okay, so when I say I don't like betting against him, I'm coming from the framework of I don't like to bet against him as an engineer. I feel like he could execute and operate quite well. Like when it comes to
Hmm.
companies, there's always
Sure.
tough times, but he comes through. I would say, as a prediction, I would say that Twitter's going to shrink. So on purpose, as a private company, I think he's going to
When you
trim.
say shrink, what exactly do you mean?
I mean that we are going to see fewer users on the platform. We're
Yep.
going to see fewer interactions and engagement, less engagement. And you're going to see a very structured and organized plan placed around tiered pricing and
Hmm.
also what it actually means to be on Twitter. So
Yeah.
I think at some point he's going to finally have something in writing that says being on Twitter means you could say these things. I mean, you cannot say these things and everything else is free for all. And this is the way it's going to be. And I think you're also going to see a lot of competition, and that's also going to put a lot of heat on Twitter to really, really clean things up. I think that the
Hmm.
corporations are going to dictate a lot of their demands to Elon about what they want in order to stay on the platform. But ultimately, I do think it's going to be for the next 2 years, I do think it's going to be a much smaller company. And then after 2 years, I'm going to say, honestly, it's 50-50. I think either people are going to go, hey, he cleaned it up and it seems better, and people are going to jump on it and they're going to enjoy the experience and it's going to grow again, or it's just going to stay small and be part of our culture for a while.
Well, what's your prediction on that?
After 2 years,
Yep.
let's see here. That'd be after the after it's 2024 ish. I'm going to say he's going to stay steady. There's not going to be a lot of growth. It's going to stay steady.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is the fact that I think Facebook's going to kind of continue to tank. I think people are going to not be on Facebook as much. I think they're going to be monitoring Twitter and using it a little bit. And I think it's going to stay steady. I don't think we're going to see a rapid growth. I don't think we're going to see like a Tesla style growth where it's just like, oh, every year we're selling twice as many vehicles. I just don't see it happening. Like, I just don't.
So, do you think that it's going to be long term, smaller, and as far
Mm-hmm.
as revenue and user base than it is today?
Yeah. Um, God, it's such a tough one because if he could pull off the things that I think he wants to pull off, I think he could build it to be a really big company and people value it and all that kind of
Mhm.
good stuff. Um, Here's what I would say. I would say that this company could be 3 times as big in 5 years if he truly implements all of the things that he wants to do, such as they had. I don't know if this is true anymore, but like uh, using Twitter for payment. Like, it's an actual payment platform. If he could turn it into a
Mhm.
super app where you log into Twitter and you could do 10 things like call your Uber, pay for your stuff, check your tweets, post a tweet. Like, if he could pull that off, this company could be 5x, 10x what it is right now. Do I think he'll pull that off?
Interesting.
I think he
Yeah.
I think
Do
he
you?
could. I think he could, but he'd have to de-emphasize the social part because the social part is what is sucks and is a mess. And what you're doing is you're putting that in front of everybody's face. You're putting the social part in front of everyone's face. I think you need to put something more enticing in front of their face to be on Twitter.
So, what do you think is the likelihood of that? You think it's more likely or less likely?
At this current state, it feels less likely.
Yeah.
But uh, if we can as a society look at super apps the way that China does, I think there
Hmm.
is a decent chance, 60%, 70% chance that he could pull it off.
Yeah. I would be. He hasn't even, as far as I know, mentioned that, and I think
No,
that Facebook has tried.
this has been stuff that people have been reporting and stuff like that, is that he's had conversations about trying to create a super app.
Yeah, I think Facebook tried that, and it didn't work out for them. And I don't think people wanted it to be Facebook, and I don't. I similarly kind of don't feel like people want it to be Twitter if it is going to be a super app. So I think from a certain element, kind of the brand perception of both Elon Musk and Twitter are making people look at this and say like, sure, but maybe not him, or maybe not this. So I think there's a bit of an uphill climb with that, and I think in order for him to get people to trust them with that, he first has to show that he can do a really good job with the social aspect of the
Yep.
platform in order to build trust with the brand.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge uphill battle. I think that might be the best long term strategy for a very big money maker. But I think that it's a difficult one. Like I look at this, my prediction ultimately is kind of the other way. And I will preface this by saying that Elon and Twitter as an organization could definitely prove me wrong. I think they're on track for basically being Dig in 2 years. I think that they can see a large scale collapse of the platform. I think it could end up being like, less than a million daily active users like Parler is.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why I think that is because what I see him doing are all the things that I feel like are kind of bad decisions. I think what you need on a social platform is to have a very clear vision of what the experience is going to be, and then providing not just the content moderation, but just like providing a very good example of like provide of giving people a good experience.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's really that interested in doing so. He's more about like creating a platform and then getting out of the way. And I don't think that's going to work out very well because it hasn't worked out for any other platforms that have tried that.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, I think we're all ready for a new generation of social.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of what that's going to look like, I think it's going to look more like Discord than it does like Twitter, where things are folks structured a little bit more around specific topics, specific like Discord has servers like Slack, if you're not familiar with Discord. So you join a certain Discord and you get content about that. Like I've joined several about my different interests and I only get stuff about that interest. You don't get a
Mm-hmm.
lot of off topic stuff. There's a lot less trolling. There's smaller communities, obviously, because they're not millions of people. Some of them are quite large. Some of them have tens of thousands of people, it seems like. That might not be an accurate number, but some of them feel large, but a Reddit, they can be, millions of people, but they're by their nature a little bit more purpose built than just kind of the large kind of overall bucket. And I think somebody's going to step in with this kind of model and just kind of take their lunch. And I don't think this is necessarily because Elon's not smart or he's not capable in a lot of ways, but I think that this is getting a power lifter to run a marathon to
Mm-hmm.
me. So I think it's just a mismatch as far as what its capabilities are and what the platform needs.
Well, everyone, you just heard it. D says Elon's a power lifter trying to run a marathon. Here's the thing, D, just to kind of wrap this up, is based on one thing that you did say, I wanted to make a comment, is that you said that Facebook tried this. Mark Zuckerberg is not liked. The difference is Elon does have a pretty strong following. Like he does some things that really like irritate people, but in general, like he has a pretty strong following behind him. So that's something, right? You know what I mean? Like some people
I
just really
mean,
like Elon.
yes, but he's also the person that Kara Swisher recently called an asshole. So
I know.
there are people who like him, but for me, like, oh wow, this is Kara Swisher saying this, who's known him, who's had personal. I've never heard her say that about Mark Zuckerberg. And I think they're similar, that they're both a little bit kind of socially awkward.
Yeah,
And I, to his credit, Mark Zuckerberg was able to pull off a successful social network for quite a while. I wouldn't call it that recently,
hmm,
and most of the success of the company is dependent on an acquisition that they made, and they didn't mess it up immediately. Although they seem to be on track for that. Maybe we'll talk about that in the future. But I don't know. I think that he has his followers. He has people who like him, but most of them are people who are not necessarily creating good social experiences for other people on the platform. Like
yeah.
there's that whole meme going around about like it's got the Simpsons and somebody shooting at Homer and Apu is jumping in front of him and it says like, Elon Musk stands protecting Elon from valid criticism. That to some extent does represent the interaction. Like it's can be difficult to have a normal conversation with a lot of his more hardcore fans.
Sure. Yeah, I know. That's understandable. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about
I
this all
I
day.
say that about some, and to some extent, that could be some people poisoning the well, but that has honestly is a bit of the brand perception. Somebody said recently that I know said that they're not really that interested in buying Tesla because it feels like it's now a kind of a frat bro perception.
That's one of the big things when it comes to brand is keeping brand perception where you want it for a long period of time. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of mental fortitude because if you're the leader and everyone looks after you in a certain way and in a certain light, if you shy away from that in any way, it can really throw a wrench into the system. So with that, I think we should wrap from here. This could be a 4-part series if we want it to be. And I'm sure it will be actually because there's so much going on. But I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen. Really appreciate it. We'll be posting these links to many of the sources we referenced on Twitter. So you can find us and follow us on Twitter, the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast number 1. If you did like this podcast and you found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you enjoy using. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you all next week.